instances, and I find this common in cases which the executive has an interest in, then you go through the rigors and the rituals of public participation, but it doesn't influence the decision. Let me give you an example. The case on CAS, the public, more than, it's actually 58% of the people who gave views were worried that the cost of the salaries was such that the country cannot afford. So what does the Public Service Commission say? That looking at, in as much as they have complained, that figure has already been budgeted for, and so therefore we can afford it. But then to add salt on the injury, you first had given 23, and on the 23, 58% are worried about the cost of the salary and whether the country can actually be able to accommodate their cost. Now, when you decide you're going to add salt onto that injury by doubling the number, so that already 58% are concerned with 23, but they say, you know what? Yes, we've had you, but we are going to double that number. So that is how superfluous it has become on certain instances. So if you look at what the presentations that were made at Parliament, and I presented together with the members of the Tax Committee, the memorandum by the Law Society, everyone who presented objected to so many things. Of course, there are some things which we commended Parliament for, and the Finance Act for, and we said, this is good, it needs to be done like this, or you can do it this way so that you can get the desired effect. Those are there. But there are so many provisions which everyone was united in opposing. So how they find their way still in the Finance Act, it basically means that that process, there's no value that has been added onto that process. You see, to say that, on this item, so and so, 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 say ABCD, ABCD, but the final analysis of the committee is that
we retain.
You see just how so that there's been no value that has been added onto the process. But it is something that we have to keep fighting for. I keep saying that we have to keep fighting for. I remember during President Kenyatta's time, and he would disregard court orders, and people would always ask, why are people going to court? Why is the Law Society going to court? Why is Okia going to court? Because the principle is important. So you go to reaffirm the principle every time it is violated. You go to reaffirm it. It may not be useful now, but in the future, surely it will be useful, and somebody will say that when this principle was violated, in those days, people protested, and so perhaps it is now time for us to follow this.
Right. Yeah. And as you follow the public participation, in your view, because it's,
So,
right.
That the public participation is not just anchored in Article 10 in the national values. It's really in Article 1, where the people are sovereign and they can exercise their power directly or through elected representatives. Then we have reached a situation whereby people come directly, they're ignored. Yeah, that's what I wanted to add, Councillor.
Right. You are in the space where you are fighting for the public as well, in civil society, we could call it. And your tracking of this, especially the finance bill, because yes, as much as we're talking about the Waheshimiwa, the MPs, there's a part where the public plays. Are they playing that part, or is it being frustrated, in your view, from what you're tracking, as Bwana Theory says?
Well, from the onset, it's difficult for them, especially youth, because we work with youth a lot, to engage. This particular constitution gives so much involvement. It's like the ideal way to interact with the Constitution is the inclusion of all people, and even with Article 1, with the people. I feel that the Constitution gives so much access to public, but public doesn't necessarily know that. In fact, you find that we spend majority of our time doing that awareness creation and then understanding the avenues of participation. And then even though they are ready to participate, then you now meet the roadblock of leaders who don't want that engagement. Because now you're holding them accountable. And even for some, it's not necessarily that they don't want, some don't know. We would find ourselves in between battles with MCAs and ward administrators because roles are clashing. A ward admin is not understanding where their jurisdiction ends and an MCA. So even in terms of the particular promises that politicians make during campaign season, it is not their role to promise roads for some people, but you're seeing them there promising roads. Or factors that are devolved and they don't even understand that some of that budget comes from the national and not county budget. So I do think that there's a lot of work to do in terms of the Constitution, as seeing it's over 12 years that we've had it. However, it's not owned by young people, but can you really blame them for not owning it? Where are they supposed to interact with it? Even when we look at our education systems, it's not ingrained with us, it's not enforced within us, it's not inculcated. So how is a young person supposed to be, like when I turn 18, participation, voting is not an event. Politics doesn't just end and start at the ballot, it's a continuation of it. Because even we should be hearing what's being debated in the bunges, in parliament. That's important. But you'll find at the end of a year, your member has not said a single word unless they've been forced to speak. And Mzalendo is constantly doing these scorecards. But we're not at a place yet where the public actually puts pressure on representatives to represent them, because that's the power the Constitution has given. People still grapple with that relation, and it's still going to take time and also effort.
Right. And there's a question here that I'll ask Jerry to speak to, and then Bwana Ukio Mtata, and even Eric, you can respond to that, as well as Nerima. Esther Nyonje, she says, we clearly see how difficult it is to break the political status quo. Keep up the good work, Mahesh. The new generation is tired of bogus politicians and will be behind you. Power is with the people. Power 254. Watu wanaongea, but is there enough, not really fury, frustration, but engagement with the public in this, as what Esther is saying? Have you felt it?
The anger is there, for sure. And what I love about this generation is that they don't take nonsense. They come out head on. But then the avenues of engagement are also not sufficient, because we don't engage with our politicians online. Then when we talk of access to this information, what form is it in? It's a report that has 277 pages or 140 something or even 60 something pages. But what does that report look like? Is it something that the TikTok generation of 1-minute videos will look at and get it and laugh and do whatever it is they need to do? So such a report or that information that we're saying, what is it consumable? It may be accessible, but is it consumable? Okay, and then also, once it's accessible, where do they find it? How do they engage with it? Is it just on my phone? The way it has come in a way that I don't quite understand. How do I engage with it? And then what I don't get, where do I go to get that information? So for me, I feel like there's not enough public participation. There could be more. It's not because it's not being tried. It's just giving very solid food to a newborn. And a newborn here being the public and the youth especially that we work with, and giving them hard food, githeri, mahindi, that they can't quite digest. So they just brush it off. If the engagement was such that they know where to find it, we have these kind of forums frequent. If there's bunge going on, it is on all media. It is on that NMG. It's on radio, all radios. it is everywhere. You can't not hear it.
Yeah.
You can't not see it.
In your face.
It's in your face,
Right.
in a language that can be understood. And even if it's, because sometimes it must, you break down the complex, yeah? So there needs to be effort to simplify these things in a way that can be consumed and in a way that I feel that I can interact with this, that it affects me. Because it's always, me, I don't want anything to do with politics. I will not even vote. It doesn't concern me. But here we are. It concerns every one of us. We are all crying about the high cost of living. We are all crying about fuel. We're crying about electricity. Does politics not concern me? Even though I didn't vote, can I proudly stand and say, me by the hizo stories za kuvote me, amtanipata, and say that I stand by my choice to not vote because it doesn't affect me? Yet, we are saying that those politicians who you didn't vote for, and even if you did, then how do you hold them to account? So when you talk of public participation, for me, even the way government has this public participation, I feel like it's forms that akina mama wa kijiji wa soko pale, whatever, are given some money, then told come and sign here. And they come and sign because they get, and then these forms are taken as proof of public participation. What that public participation for me needs to look like is there's cameras, it's documented, there's proof that people came, questioned, they were made to understand. There was 10 out of 1,000 people that were supposed to be in the room, and that was public participation. So because there were 10, then people went out and signed some papers because we needed 1,000 names, right?
And for the record.
And for the record. But then we're going to keep repeating this same cycle where people don't understand, they don't engage, because it's just too far-fetched. I'm too busy putting food on my table today. I don't even, tomorrow will take care of itself. I just need to get through today. I don't have time to go and do this public participation. We're talking about in digital rights, access. Again, for me, what does this access look like? It's on smartphones. I not only need to have a smartphone, I actually need to have access to the internet. So are we talking to Safaricom? Are we talking to Telcom? Is government just going to put a big mast everywhere at every county and everybody can have free access to internet? Then we will talk about this access to smartphones, and then what information will be provided, what will it look like? Will my mother, not my grandmother, my mother, who is quite woke, will she find it? Will she be able to interact with it? Is it something wakienda chama ya kina wamama, they'll ask, and then talk about it, engage a little bit? Is it something that when my kids see, they will not think that this is, I don't even get this, you know? So it needs to be able to touch this TikTok generation and akina my mom, so that and everyone in between there. And this public participation is not just in rooms like this, it needs to be very vibrant and continuous. It's a continuous engagement.
And I think